The destroyer rattles as if struck by a sledge. It is the 16th of April, 1945, morning haze off Okinawa, and Commander Frederick J. Beckton has just watched a dive bomber miss. Then another catch the sea with its fixed landing gear and cartwheel into spray. The men in Mount 53 work through the sulfur stink of cordite when a third plane claws in from astern, strafing and disintegrates across the after 20mm mounts. Flame climbs the fantail ladder. A bomb cooks off, and the blast punches metal into the steering gear. The rudder freezes about 26 degrees left. Laffy begins to draw a tight circle on a blue sea littered with fuel and wreckage. The young officer near Beckton asks the question no one wants to say aloud. The captain answers hard and fast, "No. I'll never abandon ship as long as a single gun will fire." A lookout, half to himself, adds that he'll find a man to fire it. Guns keep talking. 5-inch with proximity fuses, 40s barking, 20s buzzing. Above, a Corsair flashes past a mast bent by shrapnel. Below, hoses snake through smoke as sailors fight flame with foam and nerve. 80 minutes is a short film on paper. It's a lifetime when steel is burning. They believed a radar picket could turn the ocean into a tripwire. The plan put a handful of destroyers and support craft far out from the transport areas, each with CIC teams to see first and vector fighters faster, so the mass would die in the approach. The spirit of the enemy would be forced to fly uphill against a system. Air search radar, fighter direction officers, proximity fused shells, and damage control drilled past exhaustion. On the 16th of April, the system held, but just. The Japanese brought numbers, altitude splits, and pilots trained to aim themselves. Laffy brought a ship built to put steel on target and stay afloat when everything aft looked like a foundry. What they expected was to interdict early and stack. Kills outside gun range. What happened was a cage fight at mast height, with Laffy trapped in her own circling wake and planes darting through gun cones at knife-edge seconds. System met spirit in a ring drawn by a stuck rudder. Okinawa mattered because it was the last staircase. The island sits approximately equals 350 miles from Kisha. In Allied hands, it would be an air and logistics springboard for the home islands. That made the waters around it a killing ground from April through June 1945. The Japanese Plankikasui, floating chrysanthemums, committed waves of suicide and conventional sorties that raised U.S. naval losses to some of the war's worst levels. On the 16th of April, Kikasui No. 3 sent approximately equals 165 kamikaze aircraft, approximately equals 120 Navy, approximately equals 45 Army, plus conventional escorts and strikers into a cauldron of cap, pickets, and flak. The picket stations bore the brunt, and Station No. 1 was repeatedly the hottest point on the line. Radar, pickets, were the price of saving big decks and troop transports. Place small crews far forward, suffer concentrated attacks there, and trade steel and blood for warning time. Cruel math, but decisive. The offshore battle's outcome would be determined in the air, and decided by who saw first, vectored faster, and kept their ships alive long enough to keep guns in the fight. Japan's air leaders made a logical bet given their remaining means. They assumed spirit could offset system if enough pilots were willing to become the weapon. That meant massing planes to saturate cap and flak, attacking from multiple bearings and altitudes, and forcing American ships to defend in the last seconds where one mistake or one fragment through a hydraulic line could decide the fight. Many aircraft were older types, Aichi D3, Aval, and Yokosuka, D4Y, Judy. But a diving airframe at 300 to 400 knots is still lethal. The logic, collisions don't require escape routes, only approach windows. To widen those windows, attackers split high, low, staggered in time, and mixed conventional bombers to distract directors. They also counted on the picket system's geometry. Station ships were isolated by design, sometimes 40 to 70 nanometers from the anchorage. Kill one destroyer and the alarm chain weakens. Force cap to choose between multiple stations and gaps appear. No miracle thinking, just a sober exploitation of distance, fatigue, and finite ammunition. The US design philosophy behind Laffey was the opposite of improvisation. She was an Allen M. Sumner-class destroyer, 6 5-inch, 38 guns in 3 twin mounts. A heavier light air battery than the earlier twin rudders for better handling, and a robust CIC centered on radar picture, voice circuits, and practiced watch teams. As built, she carried approximately equals 12 40mm Bofors and approximately equals 11 20mm Oerlikon, with Mk37 director and Mk12 20 seconds. Fire control radars tied to the 5-inch battery, effective against aircraft with VT fuses. Her wartime complement ran approximately equals 336. She also carried the Invincible weapons, SK-SC air search for long-range cues, SG surface, low-level air sets to catch IFF for sorting friend, foe, and a CIC team that practiced fighter direction. By April 1945, many Sumners had traded an aft torpedo bank for more 40mm to answer kamikazes, a practical admission that the aerial threat had overtaken torpedo duels in priority. First contact came on 1415 April with radar plots and cap vectors. The real test arrived at approximately equals 8:30 on 16 April. Laffey scopes filled with returns from the north as Kaikasui No. 3 rolled south. Initial valves probed, jettisoned bombs when fired on, then peeled into coordinated runs from ahead and astern. Laffey's 5-inch mounts and 40s knocked down. Multiple attackers in the first Voluser, Team 4, for 4x1 reconstruction, while LCSL 51 to port helped finish a vow. You can chart the first minutes as a numbers problem. Single ship, AA sectors versus multi-axis ingress at compressing ranges. Guns win early when geometry is favorable. Then the geometry turned. A strafing attacker clipped the 40mm mounts and ignited gasoline on the fantail. Moments later, another aircraft dropped a bomb that exploded near Mount 53 and into the after 20mm magazine. Fragments tore the steering hydraulics. The rudder stuck at 26 to port, and Beckton could no longer comb attacks by heading changes, only by varying speed. Laffey began tracing tight circles, keeping broadside guns mostly an arc, but making her stern a magnet. Hits disabled Mount 53 and several 40mm and 20mm positions. The SG radar and some fire control radars took damage, forcing more local control. And still the ship shot back. The turning point was not one decision, but 3 concurrent fights. First, topside, the circle of fire. Destroyers are happiest maneuvering freely, but Beckton's helm was a wheel to nowhere. He alternated full and back emergency bell to throw off attackers' aim as the ship swung round. Fire discipline mattered. Directors shifted sectors. Local crews took over knocked-out mounts arcs, and surviving 20s kept shooting in the straps until the belts ran dry. The math was ugly. In approximately equals 80 minutes, about 22 attackers broke off toward Laffy. Conservative tallies attribute for bomb hits and 5 to 6 suicide crashes on her decks and superstructure. Second, inside CIC, fighter direction under duress. Laffy's team worked radios while antennas and sets were failing. Marine Corsairs from VMF-441 Blackjacks and other cap elements slashed in at low altitude and obscene risk, sometimes firing through Laffy's own flak to peel attackers off her beam. One Corsair reportedly clipped Laffy's radar antenna during a knife-edge pass. The pilot was fished out by LCSL-51. The coordination, albeit imperfect, changed the odds as minutes wore on. Third, below decks, the damage control wall. Fire mains ruptured. Hoses were rerun. Magazines were flooded by design and by judgment calls when flames threatened the handling rooms. Shoring timber, portable pumps, and human chains moved into compartments everyone knew might go. Engineers kept steam where it counted. Power never died completely. The aft spaces flooded, but watertight integrity aft of the engineering plants held. That continuity steel discipline, as much as steel bulkheads, kept propellers turning and gave the captain the only maneuver he had left. Throttle, radar picket duty did not run on courage alone. It ran on the U.S. Navy's logistics metabolism in 1944-45. The Allen M. Sumner run produced approximately equals 58 ships in approximately equals 24 months. Destroyers and mine layers came off ways with standardized equipment and procedures that made crews interchangeable and spare parts predictable. The same factories turned out VT fusers, Bofors barrels, and replacement radars at rates measured in weekly. The fleet's maintenance web stretched from forward anchorages to Pearl to Tacoma. When Laffy limped out on the 17th of April and later across the Pacific for major work, the yards were ready with plates, gears, and a workforce practiced in wartime repair cycles measured in weeks, not seasons. Trainers and schools mattered as much as welders. Gunnery departments drilled firing cycles and misfire procedures until they were muscle memory. Damage control, schools standardized shoring, dewatering, and firefighting methods across classes. The point is not romance, it's repetition. When a bomb opened the 20mm magazine, the crew did not debate flooding orders, they executed them. When SG died, directors dropped into local, and men who had practiced local control took it. A system is people plus paper plus parts. Intelligence and C2 were a separate layer of advantage. Long-range air search gave early warning measured in tens of miles, sometimes more, against massed raids. CIC fusions mapped bearings to vector cap first from fast carriers, then from escort decks as commitment deepened. Picket destroyers hosted specialized fighter direction officers and talkers to sort sky pictures and prevent blue and that network didn't prevent every leaker. Nothing could, but it shrank the inbound to manageable volumes for gun crews. Even when bomb blasts punched through the masts and knocked out sets, voice circuits tied Laffy to her LCS consorts and to control nodes ashore and afloat. The human capital gap also counted. Many late-war Japanese pilots had minimal instrument time and were trained for terminal dives rather than survival. The United States, by contrast, cycled crews through months of shipboard workups, live fire shoots, and underway training. Laffy had already done Normandy shore bombardment and Pacific convoy screens. Her crew had chased subs, fired in anger, and conducted real damage control before Okinawa. When you read survivor accounts, the theme is consistency, drills translated into action when the fantail burned. That preparation paid in hit probability, in misfire recovery time, and in how fast hoses found flames while magazines were secured. There's no triumphalism in this comparison-only observation. A 538 mount with a trained crew and VT fuses lands, airbursts where they matter. A 40mm team with practiced leads will walk bursts into a diving fuselage. Enough of those teams, working together, change the shape of an attack wave. Doctrine evolved to refuse the enemy's preferred fight. Early in the kamikaze campaign, ships attempted radical maneuver as the main defense. By spring 1945, experience codified in directives and reinforced by hook-style picketing favored keeping broadside arcs on the threat and pouring fused shells into the cone of approach. Laffy's predicament forced the lesson in the extreme, stuck helm. Maximum fire out the beams, engine bells used to throw off aim. It wasn't glamorous seamanship. It was doctrinal discipline under duress, measured by the fact that guns kept speaking until the last pass. Nuance matters. Laffy was not alone out there. LCSL 51 and LCSL 116 fought and bled alongside her, one taking a kamikaze hit and casualties, both helping to douse fires and recover men. Cap pilots flew into shipboard flak cones to SWAT attackers in the final seconds, accepting mid-air risks that killed friends. Some reconstructions count 5 kamikaze crashes on Laffy. Others count 6 or even 7 when near misses are rolled differently. One tally credits Laffy with 8 shoot, another 9 when cap assists are passed another way. Good history tolerates those ranges and flags them for readers. The point is not to inflate numbers. It's to recognize that 80 minutes under strafing and fire are hard to score with precision while you're surviving them. Here's the roll-up in conservative terms. Time window approximately equals 80 minutes. Morning, the 16th of April, 1945. Attackers, approximately equals 22 aircraft peeled off to hit Laffy's group. Theater level Kaikasui, no. 3 committed approximately equals 165 kamikazes that day. Laffy's damage, 4 bomb hits and 5 to 6 kamikaze crashes range reflects source variance. Casualties aboard, 32 killed, 71 wounded, approximately equals 103 total. Approximately equals 3251 nanometers from Okinawa, depending on reference point. Laffy and consorts claimed approximately equals 8 to 9 shootdowns, with cap help. Numbers shift when assisted kills are counted. The ship retained propulsion, lost steering to a jam at 26 port, and made anchorage the 17th of April 1945 with tug support across the broader campaign. US destroyers suffered heavily on the picket line, 95, damaged by suicide, bunker attacks, approximately equals 13, sunk approximately equals 13.7%, 1,940, 445. Those are system-level numbers that explain why Laffy's survival became emblematic. Psychology shows in the paper trail. After-action reports read like engineering logs shot through with shock. On the verge of breaking down completely, an NHHC study later titled "It Referring to Men and Material Under Non-Stop Strain." Beckton's message after anchorage asked for 50 gallons of gasoline not for engines, but for portable pumps keeping the water out. The phrasing is matter-of-fact, and that plainness is its own testament. When a ship writes that she needs gasoline for the pumps, You can picture the dark compartments and the men standing, ankle-deep in what they're holding back. Japanese diaries and orders show another psychology, an expectation that individual self-sacrifice could invert industrial arithmetic. The raids kept coming because leadership believed the accumulation of holes and fires would break U.S. morale before factories and training pipelines finished the job. It was a rational gamble from a nation down to last reserves, and one that exacted a terrible price in aviators. In the months after April, the logic of picket defense persisted, refined by bloody lessons. More CAP, more LCS, and LSM are support at the stations. More rapid fighter handoffs, and still more 40mm barrels appeared on destroyers, often replacing torpedo tubes entirely. Yet the pattern held. Some ships like Erin Ward and Hadley took catastrophic hits. Others, like Laffey, lived through what should have killed them. By June 1945, the last Kaikasui waves dwindled to a few dozen aircraft, too little to sway a battle decided ashore and in the air. Laffey, meanwhile, became a traveling exhibit of willpower. Photographed from PCEP CER 851, she looked torn but upright, proof to the fleet that a Sumner, fought as designed and repaired as planned, could bring her crew home. She would cross the Pacific, enter the yard at Tacoma in late May 1945, and return to service. One ethical paragraph belongs here. Radar picket duty worked by concentrating risk on small crews to spare thousands elsewhere. Those sailors stood in places deliberately chosen to draw fire by design, not accident. Off Okinawa, civilian suffering on the island and on nearby coasts was vast. Suicide tactics added a layer of tragedy for Japanese aviators, many barely trained, ordered into terminal dives. In telling how Laffey survived, the frame should stay humane. Each number is a human being. And the tactical success of drawing raids outward does not erase the moral weight carried by crews tasked to stand there. Legacy breathed into post-war doctrine. The system over spirit, lesson radar, picture fused to fighter direction. Heavy AA concentrated on approach cones, and ruthless, standardized damage control carried into Cold War air defense thinking. Destroyers that once traded torpedo banks for extra Bofors would in time trade Bofors for Terrier and Tartar, then for Aegis, arrays and missiles. The through line is early warning, centralized direction, layered fires, and crews drilled to keep a damaged hull fighting. Laffey's story also lived in training Salabi, steering failures, magazine flood decisions, and the importance of retaining propulsion under topside chaos. There is also a leadership lesson attached to one sentence from the bridge. A commander's refusal to give up must be backed by a crew that knows exactly what to do with that time, and by a system that furnishes them tools worth risking their lives to use. So the verdict, cinematically tight. On the 16th of April 1945, at Radar Picket Station No. 1, Spirit slammed into system. 20-plus attackers pressed in over approximately equals 80 minutes. 4 bombs and perhaps 6 bodies of aircraft tore into Laffey. 32 of her men died. 71 were wounded, yet the ship would not die because the American approach to warfare radar nets, CAP handoffs, prox-fused guns, practiced damage control, and an industrial repair base ready to catch survivors made one stubborn captain's sentence more than a slogan. When Laffey traced circles with a stuck rudder, she was inscribing the shape of that system in the water. And when she steadied on tow the next day, smoke still curling from her aft deckhouse, she closed the loop.